What is up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Guarani Vision, the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English. As always, I'm Roberto Rojas, and joining me are my two great co-hosts, Federico Perez and Rafael. And guys, we're a little less than a month from the World Cup qualifiers, the first games for Paraguay in really a tight, schedule for the entire year. Obviously, we have been giving attention to what we've been seeing in the U20s, obviously in the club game as well, but we can't forget the national team is also going to be taking center stage. We're almost close to March. We're about a week until the end of February. So then just a couple weeks later, we have the World Cup qualifiers. And, we're already seeing the news of Gustavo Alfaro, our manager, traveling to Europe, meeting some players. The last one I saw that he was in Italy meeting Tony Sanabria of Torino and Hugo Cuenca of Genoa. So really, and, he's been on these trips, I think, in Brazil as well and in Argentina. So he's really trying to keep tabs on a lot of these players because of course they're the ones that could be considered for the national team in a couple of weeks. And I think it's also crucial for a lot of these players to stay healthy. We'll talk about one player in general, just a bit about, feeling a bit cautious as well about his fitness. And yeah, just seeing who else could probably make that team. And I think after what we saw in the last week or so, I think there's some names that Gustavo Alfaro might have to venture, and we'll speak about that in a second. But first, let me get our co-host in. Let's go to Fede first, because obviously, you know, I think right now for Paraguay, we were talking off air about how kind of this youth structure is kind of improved in that sense. And, we're talking off this coming off the Paraguay's participation in the U20 championship in Venezuela. They finished third. Sorry, they finished fourth, finishing their win against Argentina. And I think it really provides a lot of optimism, I think, in terms of youth football. Obviously, we got the U17s coming through as well, but I think if you're a youth player in Paraguay, you should feel very optimistic about your chances of being really set on the world stage in a way.
Hi, Roberto. Hi, Raf. Hi to everyone listening to Guarani Vision. Great to be back for another one. And obviously, it has turned around for the young players and the scene itself, right? I mean, we are looked at totally different now, I believe, not just here in Paraguay, but the way that probably other countries also look at us. Even Argentina now, every time they got to face us, right? It's not like the old days, maybe. And it feels good. It feels good not just to compete, but just to see everything that the players now have available. Just like you were saying, Roberto, the new facilities, new places, new gyms, new grounds, new fields, more stadiums, better places to work. Everyone playing in just one place, which is what Cardiff is. We talked about that last year already when they opened that new place for the youth leagues, and it's just wonderful. You're just seeing it happening now in this 2025 because they just opened up. It's just being official, and we're gonna see it happening. And I think we're gonna, as the years go by, we're gonna see the effect of it. Probably just the models that we've seen all over the world, the way that many countries have already worked, and it's been successful. They're bringing that into the Paraguayan scene now, and it's just wonderful to have the results. By the way, thankfully these last couple of years have been differently for our national team in all the divisions, and it just looks great as we're heading into the under 15th now cycle. We would say we're going to look into that team also a little bit more and more. They had a fantastic year last year around 2024 with the under 15, so we're following a lot of those players, and we got so much to talk about, Roberto. I don't know where we're going to start. If we're going to talk about the Superclásico, what happened in the Libertadores this week, we had a whole bunch of players also still moving around in this open market, right? I was just looking at some of the last signings that happened. I mean, after Libertad really signed a 37-year-old Uruguayan that played 4 World Cups, I'm up for anything in this market. And to see Federico Santander signing for Luqueño, for instance, we have the top scorer of 2024, Brian Ayala, who we thought was going to play somewhere else, finally ended up in Sportivo Luqueño. Also, this is a player that contributed 12 goals last season for Dos de Mayo. Could be very interesting. You have players like Hernan Perez, for instance, who had a fantastic career in Spain, in Europe, and he's had a hard time lately finding a steady job in first division. He's going to play for Recoleta now. You have those kind of late signings happening also, right? And as for international players, I was looking at former Olimpia defender Mateo Gamarra, for instance, moving into another Brazilian team like Cruzeiro. Happy for Juan Cáceres. He had a great year last season around 2024 playing for the national team. He's going to play in Russia now with two other Paraguayans. Really happy for that move. So it's been an interesting week, Roberto. But we got to talk about Superclásico. We got to talk about Libertadores. You had it the way you wanted, man.
Yep, we will get to that as well, and we'll get to Ralph first before we obviously start this because yeah, obviously we saw some transfers. MLS also starts this week as well. Sorry, this weekend. So we have a lot of Paraguayans who have also gotten moves and also will be considered for the national team because I think that's obviously going to be a major thing for Gustavo Alfaro to look at some of the players who have been keeping their fitness, who have been able to provide good performances, some maybe that haven't been considered. I look at someone like Gilberto Flores, who just moved to Cincinnati. Could he be a player that could be considered? Looking at as well, obviously we're keeping tabs on what's happening with Julio Enciso because of an injury that he suffered with Ipswich Town. If he doesn't make it, all right, then we look at other alternatives that are going on in other leagues as well. So yeah, obviously, you have a lot of these players that have also moved, Fede, like you had mentioned, and also I think that also allows Alfaro to really open his pool because, of course, with the U20 championships that just happened, and I'm sure there have been some star players, and you could check out Ralph's Substack about some of those players that stood out. Check it out on his Twitter account and his Substack. There are some people out there that I think for Alfaro, he's got a really good problem to work with in terms of player selection, which I know is going to be the talk of the town in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's right. Hi to everybody watching and listening. And yeah, there's so much options now for Alfaro as he goes through because I mean you mentioned the Julio Enciso injury, but really that's the only player, touch wood, right now who is a doubt for the qualifiers. I mean, everybody else is looking fit. He's been going around, like you say, he's been in Brazil, now he's in Italy, he's visiting players, and you get the feeling like he wants to work with the same group that have been doing so well, but where can he just add a little ingredient that could bring something different? And so there's some options like you were mentioning. I mean, another player you talked about Russia. Alexis Duarte was actually playing really well for in Russia just before their break, right? They have the winter break, of course. So he might be another player that's starting to put himself on the list. You mentioned the U20s, and for sure, I mean Diego Leon will be considered, I'm sure, at left back because it's such a key position for Paraguay that they've been working on, and so there's a lot I think for him to go with, and it's very exciting to see some of these last minute transfers, as Fede mentioned, especially for Luqueño, that really need it, right? They've had a very poor start to the season, even since Morinigo came in. They haven't done much, so I think they're really trying to boost that team. And then we have other teams like, just to mention quickly, Sportivo Emiliano that have their stadium ready. So we've had this issue with the stadiums, and Emiliano, they left their traditional home in the center, very much in like an old part of Asuncion, and they've gone to Villeta, which is like a bit outside, like 45 minutes maybe outside, closer to the river, and built this new stadium, which I think is now good to go. So this weekend they're going to actually use it for the first time, and that starts to ease some of the issues we've seen about the youth team. The youth players have great facilities right now, but in first division, everybody's struggling a bit because of all the renovations going on. But at least we saw one problem with Emiliano to try and ease some of that as we get into this first division, and of course the big game this weekend, the Superclásico.
Yeah, it will definitely be a really a crucial, next few days and weeks as well, heading into, a lot of important games. And one of the important games that we saw yesterday was, of course, and we'll start with that first, with Cerro Porteño defeating Monagas convincingly over there in Maturin at the Estadio Monumental. Really a convincing 4-0 win against Monagas. Ralph, yeah, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you did predict on your Substack a Monagas win, which, obviously is fine. It's not exactly something controversial because, Cedro had not been that convincing in the last few games. They were going away. Usually the home team wants to get a good result before heading into being underdogs in the second leg, which they were. But man, it was really a huge big performance in this stakes for Cerro Porteño. Chico da Costa with the first goal, yeah, Guillermo Benitez with the second, Cecilio Dominguez getting one right before halftime. It was already 3-0. at halftime and before Wheeler Vieira scoring the fourth goal and decisive goal, which, if the tie was already over by the time Vieira scored, I think this tie in general is just, I personally think that if you're a Cerro fan heading into the Superclásico, you should feel very confident. And I think rightly so, given the performances that you had in this game. But man, I didn't expect a thrashing of this sense. And I'm sure Fede, you also did not expect it as well.
I don't think anybody could say they expected this because it's actually an historic win for Cerro that away from home have only scored 4 goals in the Libertadores twice. I mean, before yesterday, right? They beat Sport Boys 2001. They beat Caracas 6-0, but that's in 1995 when Venezuelan football was totally different. So I mean, even if you thought they're going to win, I don't think anybody expected this margin of victory. And it's such a great result for them because it puts the second leg pretty much to bed. I mean, they can now go all out in the Superclásico and not worry too much about who's going to play in that second leg, because the chances they really do concede 4 at home is going to be very unlikely. Although, of course, they did concede 4 at home to Bolívar in 2023, not that long ago. But no, it's a really good result. For me, totally unexpected. I mean, partly Monagas weren't really as good as I had seen them against Defensor Sporting. The red card changes things, but even before the red card, they were already struggling. But what I was really impressed by Cerro is that this is I mean, Martinez is a very attacking coach. We talked about this before, and he really doubled down, because I was listening to Fede's colleague Pepe Torres on Tigo Sports like ahead of the game. And he was saying maybe they're going to add an extra midfielder because, you're playing away from home. There's a couple of players that can't be there, and we need to rest players. And then he goes the other way, right? And he goes all out. I mean, he puts Torres and Da Costa together, which is the first time he's really played those two strikers together. And then he just has Pires da Mota kind of holding the fort with everybody else in front. All the other midfielders are out there attacking. And you even see in the second goal, Guillermo Benitez, the left back, is bursting into the box to score that second goal. So, I mean, it's a hugely attacking team. For me, it's a huge gamble, but it's definitely paid off. I mean, they were superior from the very beginning. Cerro, they were making chances. I don't think Monagas really ever got close to them in terms of, especially Jonathan Torres' movement. They never really got close to him, and he ends up with 3 assists, by the way, and a really good performance. And then you see Cecilio Dominguez he was just a bit too fast, a bit too strong for them, which is not the Cecilio Dominguez we had seen last season. If you remember, he really struggled, I think, coming back from his injury and from illness, that he wasn't really that player that made the difference. And at the moment, the way he started the season, he's starting to look very good. And so, yeah, it was really, for me, a very surprise result. As you mentioned, a really good result for Cerro. And also, remember, they did it without Gaston Jimenez and without Juan Manuel Iturbe. Iturbe has been their top scorer so far this season. So, I mean, it's very impressive. And I think they're going to be very excited going into the Superclásico.
It was such a short night, guys. Quickie one. Half an hour into the game, and it was over. Let's be honest about this one. I mean, Monagas was just not there. I mean, get your money back if you're a Monagas fan, because your team did not show up in this one. It was all over. It was Cerro Porteño all over the place, and I'm really happy for this kind of win. It's a statement win, I believe, not just because of the 4-0, but the way they played. I mean, and it was just about finding the team also for the coach, right? I mean, I heard you guys talk about it on the last episode, and yeah, Martinez had to find the team, and he found that midfield, Pires da Mota in these last couple of games, Sonora moving in there with Carrizo building up football, Dominguez being free up there. I mean, with that 4-4-2, he finally found that balance that he wasn't getting, right? I mean, it was either Torres or Da Costa lately. It was one of the two forwards. He put them in together, and the team really looked well, and they were really fighting for every single ball. I mean, this guy's just finding answers. I mean, I really believe that this was a really good first win for Cerro Porteño in the Libertadores. Hopefully, they just build from this, and they really needed that, right? I mean, they needed a game like this one. I think it was just only against a Nacional that they showed this kind of offensive power, right? That they scored 3 goals against that very, very weak team, Nacional, that has already left Libertadores in the last stage. But I mean, from Cerro Porteño, not a single bad performance from anyone. I mean, everyone showed up in this game in particular. I was kind of surprised to see that midfield without Gaston Jimenez, which had been one of the better players in this team lately. But and also he left out Juan Iturbe, right? Another player that had a lot of minutes, looking into that midfield. But I mean, Martinez was just building up into this game because last match around, he barely gave 20 minutes to Carrizo and Sonora, so he was thinking about having them totally ready for this game in Venezuela. It was a long trip, and you saw that this team was totally ready for their debut. I mean, even getting a very good performance from players that you didn't think were going to stand out in this team, like Benitez, like Perez, the center back. He's won a place over other experienced players like Bruno Valdez. So, so far, so good, I would even say, for this Cerro Porteño. I think they have it in the pocket already, Roberto. I think if you're a Cerro Porteño fan and you're going next week to watch the second leg, you're just going to a party, right? You're just going to see something that they just got to get it over with and think about moving forward in this Libertadores. I think Cerro Porteño had the best game they could have possibly have, and I want to give it to Ralph. Props to him because he mentioned Jonathan Torres, and to me that was the MVP of this game. Not just assisting, but coming back to the midfield, chipping in everywhere. I mean, he was all over the place, and when you thought that he was going to be important scoring, he ended up contributing from another place, assisting. 3 assists from him, and to me, he was probably the best player in this team, and the biggest surprise of them all.
Yeah, and I think really it comes also at a good time just because of the timing of everything with, obviously the Superclásico happening as well. So in a way, it provides a sort of confidence for Diego Martinez to look at his team, Ralph, and to really implement something that I think is so important for the Zero side. It's a gain confidence because, they had such a slow start in the Apertura. And I think a win, and we'll talk about the Superclásico in a second, but I think a win like that really motivates a team. And why wouldn't you feel motivated? The fact that you're in an international competition and you're gonna do so well, and now that you're going to that second game at home with the 4-0 lead with all the confidence that in a way you could rest your players if need be, just because of the way that the tournament works and just the results of how it really functioned for Zeno.
Yeah, and it starts to look quite good for Cerro this season, which I certainly was not convinced, right? As you pointed out before. So, but now you look at it, and on paper they've won 3 of their last 4 games. The one defeat to Trinidense was an error by Gatito Fernandez in the very last minute. So suddenly you're like, well, maybe this team is actually coming together and things are working. One thing to point out, this was their first clean sheet of the season, and I think thinking ahead to the Superclásico, that's gonna be really important to get some of that defensive solidity. But hey, if they're going out there scoring 3 and 4 goals, they're going to become very dangerous. And one thing I noticed that was really interesting, do you guys remember maybe the very first corner of the game? Chico da Costa actually gets booked with the defender, the Monagas defender, because they were like fighting over each other in the box. But you could tell Monagas were very worried about Cerro from set pieces, and you look at it, and suddenly you think Chico da Costa, even though the Chico, he's big. Gustavo Velázquez, Jonathan Torres is good in the air. Suddenly, they're going to be quite a dangerous team when they're having set pieces, and in something like the Superclásico, these can really become the difference. Remember, Olimpia did struggle defensively for a long time until they got it right. And now they're starting to struggle a little bit again, as I'm sure we'll talk about, because they're conceding goals. So these little things that we're starting to see could become make the big difference when it comes down to these key games. And yeah, for Cerro, I think it's starting to look very good, especially because, as we mentioned, not all of those players were playing. By the way, you got Gabriel Aguayo, you've got Diego Leon that could also be in the first team. They'll be back, from the U20s. So there's actually like maybe enough to fight in these 2 tournaments, which is always the big thing with Cerro. Do they have the squad that goes deep enough?
It's going to be interesting. We'll obviously go into this kind of discussion now in the Apertura with the Superclásico happening this weekend because, I feel as if though in such a performance, and we obviously look at some of these games, Fed, and we'll go to you on this first. That I look at these 2 teams in a way that they have slow starts. They're also back they're also behind two teams like Libertad and Guarani. But you feel like there has to be something that breaks through. They've gone through so many draws. I don't know how many draws we've been covering in these last few Superclásicos, but I don't know. I feel like it was probably going to go that way after what we saw, but after what we saw from Cerro, especially beating Monagas and Olimpia, yeah, they got their convincing wins and whatnot. I think they did what they did against Trinidad and Cerro did what they did against Recoleta. But you have to give the edge to Cerro after this performance. I think if the result was not 4-0, maybe it would have been a bit more closer, but I think the edge is on Cerro, really. As crazy as that sounds.
I think it has been on Cerro, that edge to win the Superclásico lately. I think the numbers speak to about 7 draws in the last 10 games. I mean, just crazy, right? To speak about a Superclásico that way, that has just been that no one has been able to won it lately, and I think Olimpia has felt really comfortable in most of these Superclásicos. Cerro has not been able to really gain momentum. So I think it's that kind of game for Cerro Porteño to use the same team that we saw against Monagas and say we're here. We're finally here in this Apertura. We can win a game like this, and we're here to catch up. I think Cerro needs to have that kind of week where they win all these 3 games. Both games against Monagas and win the Super Clásico after beating Recoleta last weekend around in a hard match in a brawl, I would even say, because it was a tight game. But Cerro hasn't shown enough yet from their forwards, especially. They haven't been able to score that much. That's why this statement win against Monagas, scoring 4 goals, is huge for them, boosting their confidence and moving forward, not just in what they can do in Libertadores, but especially in the Apertura, where they are pretty much obligated to win. And they can't fall off this race so fast. And if they lose the Super Clásico, they're gonna feel like they're gonna feel very far behind in this situation. And I like what I see from Martinez, the way he's handling the team, taking out the players that are not performing, bringing in young kids, also into the spotlight, trying to bring players back to their best version. Like we saw last year, and I think that's great. I talked about that a lot. Give Martinez some time, give this new coach some time. He's going to build a good team. He's done it before. And I think Cerro Porteño can get on that run. Is Olimpia that kind of team that they can easily go around like they did against Monagas? No way in hell. Olimpia is a very hard team. Olimpia has absolutely everything to also be the championship team again, even though they have not been 100% yet. They lost one of their most important players in Gaston Olveira, even though Marino Arzamendia has looked decent in these first games replacing him. So far, they found Lisandro Lopez in defense. That's been important also in these last couple of games. Even though he's not 100% yet, I don't see him ready for the Libertadores and what they need there, but he's going to have a couple of games before they get into that international stage. And they found a good answer with Hugo Fernandez coming into that midfield, right? When they've had trouble with their center forwards. Prato has been out in the first games. They couldn't mix them up with Benedetto, who has been out pretty much over a month now. How crazy does that sound, right? The player that you brought in to score, to put all the goals, and he's been pretty much out so far, and they have not found out answers in that sense. They've tried out with Derlis Gonzalez, but the goals are coming from other places. The goals keep coming from Rodney Redes. They keep coming from that midfield, and they're just not coming from the forwards. So that's something that Olimpia has to fix going forward, and obviously into this game for the Super Clásico, no doubt about it. They're going to need their strikers to be hot. But I'm expecting a tight one again, guys. I don't know what you're thinking about this game, but lately the Super Clásicos are all draws, Ralph. I don't know what to expect. Another draw again?
It could be. I mean, 11 games Olimpia are unbeaten in the Superclásico, right? But mostly it's draws, although they did win the last match 3-0, the last game of last year. I mean, you guys are saying Cerro might have the edge. I don't know. For all Olimpia's problems that Fede's just detailed, which is very true, they've won their last 3 games. And so they're doing that thing that they did at the end of last season where they were just getting the results however they could. I mean, last game was crazy, right? Even Richard Ortiz is scoring again. And so just before the Clásico, I think Cerro fans start to get nervous because Ortiz often pops up in those important moments. And let's not forget the journey that Cerro have back from Venezuela. That's key. Like right now, Friday morning as we record, they're training up in Venezuela. Then they're gonna get the flight back. I think it has to go via Bolivia, then to Paraguay. So then Saturday they're just gonna do what, like some very light kind of recovery stuff, and then they're into the game. Whereas Olimpia have had all week that they're just preparing for this match. Palermo will be picking his tactics based on what he wants to do, whereas Martinez hasn't had as much time to set up. So I think we shouldn't discount that for sure. And then just looking at some of the key battles, I think you mentioned Rodney Redes. Whoever plays at left back for Cerro, it has been Benitez so far, but we know Diego Leon's back. But either way, those two players, I think, against Redes are going to struggle. So you're going to have that matchup. What happens on the other side? Who's playing right back for Cerro? Because we've seen Gustavo Velasquez has been there, but we know from experience of watching Paraguay national team, when he plays at right back, if he does get very exposed to a very good winger, then he can become in trouble. If he can get a bit closer to his center back and have some support from whoever's in front of him, then maybe he'll be okay. But there, I think down those two wings, you can see that Cerro's fullbacks could get exposed, and that might be where Olimpia find a difference. But then just talking about the goalkeeper situation, this is the first time I think that Cerro for a long time might feel like, oh, we've actually, we're actually okay in the goalkeeper situation. Because if you remember, there's been many times where Jean Fernandez was either injured or wasn't playing, and you had like Miguel Martinez, and then he got sent off one time, right? And so Cerro have suffered a bit with the goalkeeper situation, and now it's on its reverse. Olimpia, that have had such a good goalkeeper for so long, out injured. And so even though, like Fede says, Arsamendi has been doing well, this is a big game now. This is a lot of pressure. Maybe the biggest crowd he'll have had all season. So suddenly it becomes a bit of a different test. I mean, it maybe it's boring to say, but honestly, I could see a draw in this game again. I mean, you're seeing what I think we'll really see from Cerro is a team that's going to have to try and be very tight at the beginning. They're going to be recovering. They're going to be tight, getting it back into the game. So I think if they can avoid what happened in the last match where they were losing after like 4 minutes, right? Or something crazy. Eric Lopez scored very early on. So if they can avoid something like that, then we could get another tight game. And who knows? It could be another draw.
Someone has to win, Fede. Someone needs to win. It can't go for this long, this long consecutive run of draws. So you're saying a draw, Ralph. That is your prediction. You just go right there on the record. You're
I'm
gonna
gonna
say
go with a 1-1 draw. Yeah.
okay. Fede, what do you say?
Yeah, Rob contributed there, with the trip, the long trip. The guys, probably been partying around after that win against Monagas. I think Olimpia has the better hand. They've been here the whole week. They had a very easy last game before the Superclásico to even come in, with their best team moving forward. They got Prato back. He's always showing up in the Superclásicos, even though he might just come in just a little while in the second half. You can still make that difference in a game like this. And I think Olimpia is the team that's actually building a better situation in this Apertura as of right now. So and they're in the driver's seat. They're the last champion. They won the last Super Classico. So I got to give it to them. I got to put them on as a favorite in this Super Classico just by a goal, but they're gonna win.
Okay, well, it looks like we're gonna be different this time around. I think we're all gonna have different predictions. I'm still convinced that even with all these trips and whatnot, that Cerro Porteño still feel like they have the edge. I don't know why. I just have this good feeling about them. So I'm gonna say they're gonna win. They're gonna break that streak, and yeah, I think it's a huge motivation push. It's gonna be a tight game. I'll say 1-0 to Cerro, but I think it's gonna be the result that I feel like is gonna really kickstart a campaign for them because it was a slow start, and I think the results that happened midweek kind of helped them in a way that it allows them to be a bit more motivated. So I don't know. I don't know. That's just my feeling about that as well. But yeah, I think it should be an interesting call. But please no draw. We don't want another draw in this one, as much as Ralph probably wants to see that. Um, yeah, it's going to be really an interesting sort of game that, obviously a lot of people are going to look forward to. I think it's going to be really good. And I don't know. I feel like, who, regardless of who wins or loses, we'll close it on this one. But Fede, I don't think if we do have a loser, I still don't think that their championship run is over by any stretch of the imagination, just because of how tight the table is.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on that. And I don't see a team that's running away from it yet, right? You don't see Guarani having enough yet. If they lose one or two players, they're gonna have problems. You see Libertad totally in it, but they're eventually gonna lose a couple of games also. Even though I do think they are the better team as of right now, just the way they're playing and everything they have available, the way they're solving even games. For me, right now, Libertad, I repeat, is the better team in this apertura. And it's up for grabs as for Olimpia, Cerro Porteño. One of these two teams is going to get in the conversation. One of these two teams is going to have a championship run. They always do. And these kind of games are the ones that take away that situation, right? These are the ones that kind of give you that boost for the rest of the season. So anyone that wins the Superclásico might have just what it takes, that extra that you need.
Yeah, I mean, talking today, Libertad's top by 1 point from Guarani, and it's pretty much because they beat Guarani in a very tight match. Cerro play Guarani next week, I think, right? That's the next fixture after the Superclásico, or the next league fixture. So, I mean, there's so many big games still to come. Olimpia and Libertad have to face off. So, like I said, like you guys are saying, I don't think this would count anybody out of the title race. But wow, I mean, a win is really going to help, because ultimately the title's going to come down to probably the games between these four teams that we're talking about: Olimpia, Cerro, Guarani, and Libertad. They seem to be the four that are going to make the difference. And so who can start winning those games? And Libertad have maybe that slight advantage because they did beat Guarani, which I think was really important. But then Guarani beat Olimpia, and then Libertad and Cerro drew. So you see, at the moment, it's really getting very, very close between the big four. It seems like very like early 2000s Premier League, the way we're talking about it, the big four. But I think between Cerro and Olimpia, they don't need to fear the fear of losing this. It's more just to go out and keep going, looking for this in the long term for the Apertura.
Absolutely. I think it's going to be a really an interesting Super Classico. I can't wait to see what happens. Also, can't wait to see what happens in the next game between Central and Monagas, to see how much of a party, like you said, Fede, will be over there that night. Oh, yeah. And yeah, obviously, we'll discuss it as we always do here on Guarani Vision. For myself, Roberto Rojas, Fede Perez, and Ralph Hanna, thank you so much for listening in. See you soon.